Course in Miracles, Original Edition, Chapter 11, Section 4, The Investment in Reality. I once asked if you were willing to sell all that you have and give to the poor and follow me. This is what I meant. If you had no investment in anything in this world, then you could teach the poor where their treasure is. The poor are merely those who have invested wrongly, and they are poor indeed. And because they are in need, it is given you to help them, since you are among them. Because they are in need, it is given you to help them, since you are among them. Consider how perfectly your lesson would be learned if you were unwilling to share their poverty. Because poverty is lack, and there is only one lack, since there is but one need. Suppose another insists on having you do something you think you don't want to do. The very fact of their insistence should tell you that they believe that their salvation lies in doing this thing, and in you doing it. And if you insist on refusing to do it, which means if you experience a quick response of opposition, then you are believing that your salvation lies in not doing that thing. You then are making the same mistake that they are, and you are making their error real to both of you. Because insistence means investment, which means what you invest in is always related to your notion of salvation. Insistence means investment, and what you invest in is always related to your notion of salvation. The question is always twofold. First, what is to be saved? And second, how can it be saved? That's always the question. Now, whenever you become angry with another person, for whatever reason, you are believing that the ego is to be saved, and to be saved by attack. Now, if they attack, then that means you are agreeing with their belief that it's the ego to be saved and saved by attack. And if you attack, then you are reinforcing their error, their belief. But remember this: those who attack are poor. Their poverty asks for gifts, not for further impoverishment. And you who could help them are surely acting destructively if you accept their poverty as yours. If you had not invested as they had, it would never occur to you to overlook their need. Recognize what doesn't matter. And if another asks you for something so-called outrageous, do it, because it doesn't matter. Refuse, and your opposition establishes that it does matter to you. It is only you, therefore, who have made the request outrageous, because nothing can be asked of you, and every request of another is for you. Why would you insist in denying them? Because to deny them is to deny yourself and to impoverish both. They are asking for salvation, just like you are. Poverty is of the ego and never of God. No so-called outrageous request can be made of one who recognizes what is valuable and wants to accept nothing else. Salvation is for the mind, and salvation is attained through peace. Peace of mind is the only thing that can be saved, and peace is the only way to save it. The mind is the only thing that can be saved, and peace is the only way to save it. Any response other than love arises from a confusion about the what and the how of salvation, of release. And this is the only answer. Never lose sight of this, which means never allow yourself to believe even for an instant that there is another answer besides. It's only the mind that needs to be preserved, and the only way to preserve the mind is peace. Never allow yourself to believe even for an instant that there is another answer, that the only thing that needs to be saved in any situation is the mind, and the only way to save it is peace. Don't forget that. Don't allow yourself to believe even for an instant that there is another answer, because if you do, you will surely place yourself among the poor. And the poor are those who don't understand that they dwell in abundance, and that release and abundance is come. And so to identify with the ego is to attack yourself and make yourself poor. To identify with the ego is to attack yourself and make yourself poor. That is why everyone who identifies with the ego feels deprived. That's why everyone who identifies with the ego feels deprived. When you identify with the ego and then feel deprived, then what you experience then is depression or anger. But all you really did was to exchange your self-love for self-hate, making you afraid of yourself. But you don't realize this. Even if you are fully aware of anxiety, you don't perceive anxiety's source as your own ego identification. And then you always try to handle your anxiety by making some sort of insane so-called arrangement with the world when you feel anxious. You identified with your ego, and so now you feel deprived, and then you experience depression or anger. But what really happened is you just exchanged your self-love for self-hate. You made yourself afraid of yourself, and you don't realize what you did. And even if you are fully aware of the anxiety that you have, you don't see your anxiety's source as your own ego identification. And so you always try to handle your anxiety by making some sort of insane arrangement with the world. And in this, you always see the world as outside of yourself. Because seeing the world as outside of yourself is crucial to your adjustment to the world. You don't realize that you make this world. Because you don't realize that there is no world outside of you. If only the loving thoughts of God's souls are the world's reality, then the real world must be in your mind. Your insane thoughts too must be in your mind. But an internal conflict of this magnitude cannot be tolerated. And that's because a split mind is endangered. And the recognition that your mind encompasses completely opposite thoughts within itself is intolerable to you. A split of that magnitude in your own mind is intolerable to us, and so our mind projects the split, not our reality. And so everything you see as the outside world is merely your attempt to maintain your ego identification. Everything you see as the outside world is merely your attempt to maintain your ego victim identification. Because everyone believes that identification is salvation. Yet consider what has happened. For thoughts do have consequences to the thinker. Let's consider what has happened here. Not because it's real or it's happened, but because thoughts do have consequences to the one who thinks them. You are now at odds with the world as you perceive it because you think the world is antagonistic to you. And believing that the world is antagonistic to you, well, that's a necessary consequence of what you have done. What have you done? You have projected outward what is antagonistic to what is inward. And therefore, you would have to perceive the world as outside of you and antagonistic to you. But this is why you must realize that your hatred is in your mind and not outside your mind before you can get rid of the hatred. And it's also why you must get rid of the hatred that's in your mind before you can perceive the world as it really is, which is not antagonistic to you or outside of you. We once said that God so loved the world that he gave the world to his only begotten Son. Well, God does love the real world. And those who perceive the real world's reality, they don't see the world of death. That's because death is not of the real world in which everything is eternal. The real world is the world in which everything is eternal. God gave you the real world in exchange for the world you made out of your split mind which is the symbol of death, by the way. But God gave you the real world. And God gave you the real world in which everything is eternal, and he gave it to you in exchange for the world you made out of your own split mind, which was a symbol of death. Because if you could really separate yourself from the mind of God, then you would die. And the world you see is a world of separation. If you could really separate yourselves from the mind of God. You were willing to accept even death to deny your Creator. But your Creator wouldn't have it so. And so you can't deny your Creator. You still could not will against your Creator. And that's why you have no control over the world you made. You can't think against love. You can't will against your Creator. You can't deny your Creator. And that's why you have no control over the world you made. The world you made is not a world of will, because it's governed by the desire to be unlike God, and this desire to be unlike God is not will. That's not real thinking. The world you made is therefore totally chaotic. That means that the world that you made is governed by arbitrary and senseless so-called laws. And that's why the world is without meaning of any kind. The world that you made is totally chaotic, governed by arbitrary and senseless laws and without meaning of any kind, because the world you made was made out of what you don't want, projected from your mind because you were afraid of it. Yet this world that's totally chaotic, governed by arbitrary and senseless laws and without meaning of any kind, this world is only in the mind of you, its maker, along with your real peace and your real happiness. This chaotic, insane world is only in your mind, the mind of you who made it. And it's there in your mind who made it, along with your peace and your happiness and your salvation. Do not believe that the world is outside of yourself. Because only by recognizing where your mind is, only by recognizing where the world, your world is, only by recognizing where it is, will you gain control over it. For you do have control over your mind, since the mind is the mechanism of decision. You do have control over your mind, since your mind is the mechanism of decision. If you will recognize that all attack which you perceive is in your own mind and nowhere else, then you will have at last placed your world's source. And where your world began, there your world as you see it now must end. For in this same place in your mind, where your world began, where what you're going through began, in this same place also lies your happiness, your release. And also in your mind, where your world began, is the altar of love, where love abideth, is there. The altar of love, where love abides, is there in your mind also. You have defiled the altar of love in your mind, but you haven't defiled the world. Yet love has placed the correction in your mind for you. So bring your perceptions of your world to the altar of love in your mind, because this is the altar to truth. And there in your mind, at the altar to truth that love placed in your mind, you will see your vision changed. And there you will learn to see truly. And from this place in your mind, where your vision is changed and you learn to see truly, from this place where you and God's souls dwell in peace and where you are welcome, then you will look out in peace and behold the world truly as it is. But to find this place, you must relinquish your investment in the world as you have projected it. To find the real world, and to find the altar of truth in your mind from which you can look out and see the real world, to find this place in your mind, and to find the real world, you must relinquish your investment in the world as you have projected your world. In other words, you must allow the spirit of truth in your mind to project the real world to you from the altar of truth in your mind. Seeking and finding. The ego is certain that love is dangerous. and that love is dangerous. This is always the ego's central teaching. Now, your ego never puts it this way. The ego never says love is dangerous. On the contrary, everyone who believes that the ego is their salvation is intensely engaged in the search for love. Yet the ego, though encouraging the search for love very actively, makes one proviso: don't find it. And so your ego's dictates then can be summed up very simply as seek for love very actively, seek for love, but don't find it. And that you not find love, even though you seek for it very actively, that's the one promise that the ego holds out to you, and that's the one promise that your ego will keep. Because the ego pursues its goal of you seeking for love actively but not finding it, and it pursues this goal with fanatic insistence. And the ego's reality testing, though severely impaired, is completely consistent. The search which the ego undertakes for love, our search for love as directed by our ego, this search which our ego undertakes for love is therefore bound to be defeated. And since the ego also teaches that it is your identification, then your ego's guidance leads you to a journey which must end in perceived self-defeat. And since your ego also teaches that it is you, then your ego's guidance leads you to a journey which must end in perceived self-defeat. Because the ego cannot love. And in the ego's frantic search for love, it is seeking what it is afraid to find. Now, if you are still identifying with your ego, then you cannot love. And so in your frantic search for love, you are seeking what you are afraid to find. If you're identifying with your ego, which is afraid of finding love, which doesn't want to find love, then you cannot love. And so in your frantic search for love, you are seeking what you are afraid to find. And so your search for love must end in perceived self-defeat. But the search for love, your search for love is inevitable, because the ego is part of your mind, and because of your ego's source, which is your mind, then your ego is not wholly split off or from you, your mind, or it couldn't be believed at all. Because it is your mind that believes in the ego, and is your mind that gives existence to the ego. Yet it is also your mind that has the power to deny the ego's existence. And you will surely deny your ego's existence when you realize exactly what the journey is on which your ego sets you. You will surely deny your ego's existence when you realize exactly what the journey is on which your ego sets you. It is surely obvious that no one wants to find what would utterly defeat them. And being unable to love, your ego would be totally inadequate in love's presence, because your ego wouldn't be able to respond at all in love's presence. Being unable to love. And so, in the presence of love, in love's presence, you would have to abandon your ego's guidance, because it would be quite apparent that your ego had not taught you the response pattern that you need in the presence of love. And so, your ego will therefore distort love. It will, in the presence of love, become afraid of the love, not be able to respond to the love. And so your ego will distort the love that it finds itself in the presence of. And the way that the ego will distort the love that you find yourself in the presence of, because you were seeking love, your ego will then teach you that love calls forth the responses which the ego can teach, like fear, like attack, like separation. And because your ego didn't teach you the response pattern you need in the presence of love, and because the ego feels totally inadequate in love's presence and can't respond to the love, the ego therefore will distort the love by teaching you that the love that you're in the presence of calls forth the responses which the ego can teach, like fear, like attack. And so, if you follow your ego's teachings, then you're going to search for love, but you won't recognize it. You will distort it. You will be totally inadequate in its presence if you follow your ego's teachings. Do you realize that the ego must set you on a journey which cannot but lead to a sense of futility and depression? Do you realize that? For surely to seek and not find love is hardly joyous. And to seek and never find love, to seek for love but be totally inadequate in its presence and then distort it and fear it, that can't but lead to a sense of futility and depression. And to seek and not find love is hardly joyous. And so the Holy Spirit, your loving right mind, the universal inspiration, offers you another promise, and a promise that will lead to joy. For the universal inspiration's promise, your higher mind's promise, is always seek for love, and you will find love. That's the promise that the loving right mind leads you, offers you. Now, under your higher mind's guidance, under the guidance of your loving right mind, then you cannot be defeated in your search for love. Spirit's journey is the journey to accomplishment. Your loving right mind's is the journey to accomplishment. And the goal that your higher mind sets before you, your higher mind will give you. The goal of love that your divine indweller sets before you, the goal of finding the love, your divine indweller will give you. Because your divine indweller will never deceive a soul of God, a child of God, whom God loves with the love of the Creator. You will undertake a journey here because you are not at home in this world. And that means you will search for your home. You will search for love, whether you know where your home of love is or not. And if you believe that your home, and if you believe that your love is outside yourself, then your search for love and your search for your home will be futile. Because you will be seeking for your home and you will be seeking for love where it is not. You don't know how to look within. You don't know how to look within yourself. And you don't know how to look within yourself because you don't believe your home is there in yourself, within yourself. But yet your higher mind knows that your home is within yourself, and he knows it for you. And your loving right mind will guide you to your home in love, because that is your higher mind's mission. And as your divine indweller fulfills its mission, your divine indweller will teach you your mission, because your mission is the same as your divine indwellers. So by guiding your brothers and sisters home, you are following your divine indweller. Behold the guide that your Creator gave you, that you might learn that you have eternal life. See the guide. Behold the guide that your Creator gave you, that you might learn you have eternal love, which is eternal life. Because death is not your Creator's will for you, nor your will for you. And whatever is true is the will of the Creator. You pay no price for life was given you. But you do pay a price for death, and a very heavy one. If death is your treasure, if ego is your treasure, if fear of love is your treasure, then you will sell everything else to purchase it. If the ego and the ego's beliefs, if fear is your treasure, then you will sell everything else to purchase it. And you will believe that you have purchased it. And you will believe that you have purchased it because you have sold everything else. You cannot sell heaven. You cannot sell your home of eternal love that is within. That's because your inheritance can neither be bought nor sold. There can be no disinherited parts of the family of God, because God is whole, which means all of God's creations are like God. And that's why you can't sell your inheritance. You can't sell your inheritance, because there can be no disinherited parts of the family of God, because God is whole. And all of God's creations and all of God's extensions are like Him. The healing plan of man was not the price of our wholeness. The atonement was not the price of our wholeness. But the atonement was the price of your awareness of your wholeness. For what you chose to sell, your inheritance of heaven, eternal love within, what you chose to sell had to be kept for you, since you could not buy it back. Yet you must invest in what you tried to sell. And you must invest in what you had tried to sell, your inheritance, which is eternal love within. You must invest in it. It was kept for you, since you can't buy it back, but you've got to invest in it, and not with money, but with your spirit. because spirit is will, and will is the so-called price of your inheritance, your awareness of eternal love within you. Your inheritance waits and awaits only the recognition that you have been redeemed. You have been kept. You were never disinherited, and your inheritance was kept for you. You have been redeemed. And your inheritance awaits only that recognition. Your divine indweller guides you into love eternal. But you must relinquish your investment in death. Your loving right mind guides you into life eternal and love eternal, but you must relinquish your investment in death, in a love that ends. Or you will not see life, eternal love, even though it's all around you. If you don't relinquish your investment in a love that ends and a life that ends, then you won't see the everlasting eternal love and life, even though it's all around you. And so that brings us to the sane curriculum. Only love is strong, because love is undivided. The strong do not attack because they see no need to attack. Before the idea of attack can enter your mind, you must have perceived yourself as weak. Because you had attacked yourself and believed that the attack was effective, now you behold yourself as weakened. And no longer perceiving yourself and all your brothers as equal, and regarding yourself as weaker, now you attempt to equalize the relationship you have made with your brother. And then you use attack to equalize the relationship that you saw yourself as weaker in. You use attack to equalize the relationship difference you have made, because you believe that attack was successful in weakening you and making you no longer equal. And that is why the recognition of your own invulnerability is so important in the restoration of your sanity. Before the idea of attack could even enter your mind, you must have perceived yourself as weak, or else you would never see a need to attack in order to equalize the situation in which you began to feel weaker. Weaker because you attacked yourself. Weaker because you attacked yourself. That is why the recognition of your own invulnerability is so important in the restoration of your sanity. Because if you accept your invulnerability, then you are recognizing that attack has no effect. And so even though you did attack yourself, and very brutally, you'll still be demonstrating that nothing happened. If you accept your invulnerability, if you accept the fact of your invulnerability, then you will be recognizing that even though you did attack yourself, and very brutally, that the attack had no effect, as evidenced by your invulnerability. And so you will be demonstrating that nothing happened, because here you are still invulnerable. Therefore, by attacking, yourself and believing that you had weakened yourself and made yourself unequal to others, that you didn't do anything. And once you realize you didn't do anything, you didn't make yourself weaker, you didn't make yourself unequal, then now you don't need to attack others in order to equalize the situation. Once you realize you are invulnerable and your attack, even though it was brutal, didn't do anything, and that you're still strong, now you will no longer see a need to attack in self-defense to equalize the situation or relationship. You'll realize that there's no sense in attack. You will have realized that attack manifestly does not work, and cannot protect you. Attack manifestly does not work in equalizing the situation and making me feel stronger, and attack cannot protect me. Yet the recognition of your invulnerability has more than negative value, which means if your attacks on yourself have failed to weaken you, then you are still strong. And if you are still strong, then you have no need to equalize the situation or relationship to establish back your strength. You will never realize the utter uselessness of attack except by recognizing that your attack on yourself had no effects. The attack on myself had no effects. The attack on myself had no effects. I will never realize the utter uselessness of attack except by recognizing that my attack on myself had no effects. Because others do react to attack if they perceive it. And if you are trying to attack them, then you will be unable to avoid interpreting this as reinforcement, them reacting to attack if they perceive it. If you're trying to attack them, then you will be unable to avoid interpreting their defense as reinforcement that your attack on yourself did have effects. The only place where you can cancel out all reinforcement of attack is in yourself. The only place you can cancel out all reinforcement of the attack that you made upon yourself and then upon others in defense is yourself. Is the only place you can cancel out all reinforcement of attack that you made on yourself and others. Because you are always the first point of your attack. You are always the first point of your attack. And if your attack on yourself has never been, then your attack has no consequence. No consequences. Your loving right mind's love, your divine indweller's love for you is your strength. Because your strength is divided, and so your strength can't be depended upon. You can't trust your own love when you attack it. You can't trust yourself. You can't trust your own love when you attack it. And that's why your divine indweller's love is your strength. Your love is divided because you have attacked your love. And so your higher mind's love is your strength. You cannot learn of perfect love with an attacking mind. You cannot learn of perfect love with a split mind, a mind attacking itself. And you cannot learn of perfect love with a split mind, because a split mind, a mind that is attacking itself, has made itself a poor learner. You tried to make the split, the attack in your mind, on yourself, eternal. You tried to make the attack on yourself, your weakness, you tried to make it eternal. And you tried to make the attack on yourself, your weakness, eternal, because you wanted to retain the characteristics of creation. You wanted to be God, but with your own content. Yet creation is not of you. And poor learners need special teaching. You have learning handicaps in a very literal sense. There are areas in your learning skills which are so impaired that you can progress only under constant, clear-cut direction provided by a teacher who can transcend your limited resources. And this teacher becomes your resource. Because of yourself, you cannot learn. Not with a mind attacking itself. Not with a mind attacking itself and making itself seem weak and in need of defense. Of yourself, you cannot learn. And that's because the learning situation in which you have placed yourself is impossible. And in this learning situation that you put yourself in that is impossible, you need a special, you clearly require a special teacher and a special curriculum. And poor learners are not good choices for teachers, either for themselves or for anyone else. You would hardly turn to a poor learner to establish your curriculum for peace, your curriculum by which you can escape from your limitations. If the poor learners understood what is beyond them, then the poor learners would not be handicapped. You don't know the meaning of love, and that is your handicap. You don't know the meaning of love, and that is your handicap. So don't attempt to teach yourself what love means, and don't attempt to try to set up the learning goals, the curriculum goals, where your curriculum goals for teaching the meaning of love have failed. Your learning goal has been not to learn the meaning of love. Your goal was not to learn the meaning of love. And that certainly couldn't lead to successful learning what love means. You can't transfer what you have not learned. And so the impairment of your ability, the impairment of the ability to generalize is a crucial learning failure. You cannot transfer, you cannot generalize what you didn't learn. And the impairment of the ability to generalize is a crucial learning failure. Would you ask those who have failed to learn what learning aids are for? They don't know. For if these poor learners, who are poor teachers, could interpret the learning aids correctly, well, they would have learned from them. So don't attempt to teach yourself the meaning of love, which is what you don't understand. Don't try to set up learning goals for yourself and others in how to know what the meaning of love is. We have said that the ego's rule is seek and do not find. We said that. Translated into learning terms, this is the same as saying try to learn, try to learn, try to learn, try to learn very actively, but don't succeed. Don't learn. Seek but do not find in learning terms, in learning the meaning of love, is try to learn the meaning of love, but don't succeed. Now the result of this curriculum, which is try not to learn the meaning of love, that's what we have been trying to teach ourselves and others. How not to find the meaning of love. That's been our learning goal, and that is because the ego, when it comes to learning the meaning of love, has one saying, try to learn the meaning of love, but don't succeed. Now the result of this curriculum goal is obvious. The result of this curriculum goal, the result of the goal of learning what is not the meaning of love, the result of that learning goal is obvious. When you don't want to learn the real meaning of love, then every legitimate aid for what love really means, every real instruction of learning what love, the real meaning of love, and every sensible guide to the meaning of love will be misinterpreted. If the goal is not to learn the real meaning of love, but to make up my own, if that is the goal of my learning, then every legitimate teaching aid that comes into my experience, every real teaching, every real instruction that I receive relative to what love really means, and every sensible guide to learning the real meaning of love, I will misinterpret. Because all those legitimate teaching aids and real instructions and sensible guides to learning, they are all for learning facilitation, which this strange curriculum goal is against. If you are trying to learn how not to learn the meaning of love, and are using the aim of teaching to defeat itself, then what can you expect but confusion? The curriculum you are trying to teach yourself does not make sense. Your learning goal is how not to learn. Your learning goal is not to learn. That curriculum doesn't make any sense, and that curriculum, what could it produce but confusion? This kind of so-called learning, trying to not learn, this kind of so-called learning, try to learn but don't learn because you're afraid of learning, because you don't want to learn, you really just want to make something up yourself. This kind of so-called learning has so weakened your mind that you cannot love, because the curriculum you set yourself, the curriculum you have chosen is against love and amounts to a course in how to attack yourself. That's why it seems like you cannot love or be loved, because your so-called learning has so weakened your mind. In other words, the curriculum goal, what you've been trying to learn, is against love. What you've been trying to learn and teach yourself, what you've been trying to teach yourself, instead of learning is against love, and what you've been trying to teach yourself instead of learning amounts in a course in how to attack yourself. A necessary minor supplementing this major curriculum goal is learning how not to overcome the split which made this goal believable. I've been trying how to not learn. I've been trying to learn how not to overcome the split in my mind. I've been trying to learn how not to overcome my willingness to attack myself. And all my learning was on the ego's behalf. Yet who you really are and what you really want speaks against all this that you've taught yourself. Just like all that you've taught yourself about how not to find love also speaks against your will. And so you fight against learning and you succeed, for that's what you want. But you do not realize even yet that there is something that you do want to learn, and that you can learn it because it is your will to learn it. My goal has been not to learn. My will has been against learning and has amounted in a course on how to attack myself. But there is something that you do want to learn. And you can learn it because it's your will to learn it. And what is this thing that it is your will to learn, this thing that you do want to learn and that you can learn? It's the real meaning of love, the meaning of love. That's what we've been trying not to learn. And instead of trying to learn the meaning of love, we have been teaching ourselves how to attack ourselves and others. But there is something you do want to learn. And there is something that you can learn because it is your will to learn it. You who have tried to learn what you don't want, you who have tried to learn how to attack yourself instead of what love really means, you should take heart. Because although the curriculum you set yourself is depressing indeed, the curriculum you set yourself is merely ridiculous if you look at it. Is it possible that the way to achieve a goal like love is not to attain it? Resign now as your own teacher. Resign now as your own teachers. Resign now as your own teachers. Now this resignation from being your own teachers will not lead to depression. Resigning now as your own teacher is merely the result of an honest appraisal of what you have taught yourselves and of the learning outcomes which have resulted. You resigning as your own teacher is just an honest appraisal. That just comes from an honest appraisal of what you've been teaching yourself and what has been the outcome of that. So, you resigning now as your own teachers need not lead to depression. It's just an honest appraisal of what you've taught yourself and the outcome, which is to attack myself. And so I now resign as my own teacher. I now resign as my own teacher. You now resign as your own teacher. We now resign as our own teachers. Under the proper learning conditions you can't provide or understand, you will become an excellent learner and an excellent teacher. But it's not so yet, and it will not be so until the whole learning situation as you have set it up is reversed. I accept the entire reversal of the entire learning situation as I have set it up. I accept the reversal of that. I accept the reversal of the whole learning situation as I set it up, of attacking myself. And your learning potential, properly understood, is limitless. Your learning potential, properly understood, is limitless because your learning potential will lead you to God. You can teach the way to God and learn the way to God if you follow the teacher who knows the way to eternal love and love's curriculum for learning it. Follow the teacher who knows the way to eternal love within yourself, heaven, your inheritance. Follow the teacher who knows it, the way, and how to learn it. The curriculum of this teacher who knows the way to your inheritance, your eternal love within. This teacher's curriculum is totally unambiguous. This teacher's curriculum, totally unambiguous, because the goal is not split, opposed, divided. Your higher mind's curriculum is unambiguous. It's not confusing, because the curriculum goals of your higher mind are not divided. And also the means and the end are in complete accord when we're talking about the curriculum of the teacher who knows the meaning of love. Everything else, you need offer only undivided attention. You need offer only undivided attention. This teacher knows the way to teach you the meaning of love, and also knows how to teach you how to stop attacking yourself and find the eternal love within yourself. This teacher's curriculum is not confusing at all, because the goal of this curriculum isn't divided, which means the means for the accomplishment of this curriculum and the accomplishment of this curriculum, they are in complete accord. The means and the end of this curriculum are in complete accord. You need offer only undivided attention. Everything else will be given you, because it is your will to learn aright, and nothing can oppose the will of a child of God. It is your will to learn the meaning of love instead of how to attack yourself, and nothing can oppose your will to learn that. And that's because your learning is as unlimited as you are. Your learning is as unlimited as you are. the vision of Christ. Your ego is trying to teach you how to gain the whole world and lose your own soul. Your loving right mind teaches that you cannot lose your soul, and there is no gain in the world, for of itself the world profits nothing. To invest in something without profit is surely to impoverish yourself, and the overhead is high. To invest in something without profit is surely to impoverish yourself, and the overhead is high. Not only is there no profit in the investment, but the cost to you is enormous. Because this investment in something without profit costs you the world's reality. It costs you the world's reality by denying your reality and gives you nothing in return, is what the investment in the world returns you. You cannot sell your soul, but you can sell your awareness of your soul. You cannot see your soul, but you will not know your soul when you perceive anything else as more valuable than your soul. Your divine indweller is your strength, because your divine indweller perceives nothing but your soul as you. Your loving right mind is your strength, because your loving right mind perceives nothing but your soul as you. Your divine indweller is perfectly aware that you do not know yourselves, and your divine indweller is perfectly aware of how to teach you what you are, perfectly aware of how to teach you what you are as a soul. Because your divine indweller loves you, your divine indweller will gladly teach you what it loves in you. And your divine indweller wants to share what it loves in you with you. Remembering you always, your divine indweller cannot let you forget your worth, because the Creator never ceases to remind you, your loving right mind, of you. And your Creator never ceases to remind you of your Creator. In other words, God is in your memory, and that's why God is in your memory, because of your divine indweller. God is in your memory because of your divine indweller. You chose to forget your Creator, God, your Father, but you didn't really want to do so, and therefore you can decide otherwise. And just like it was my decision to decide otherwise, so is it your decision to decide otherwise. I chose to forget my Creator, my loving Creator, my loving Source. But because it wasn't my will to do so, I can always decide otherwise. And just like my teacher decided otherwise, so is it my decision to decide otherwise. You do not want the world. The only thing of value in the world is whatever part of the world you look upon with love. This gives your world the only reality it will ever have. Whatever part of it you look upon with love is the only reality that your world will ever have. The world's value is not in itself. But your value is in you, yourself. As self-value comes from self-extension, so does the perception of self-value come from the projection of loving thoughts outward. As self-value comes from self-extension, so does the perception of self-value come from the projection of loving thoughts outward. So does the perception of self-value come from the projection of loving thoughts outward. Just like self-value comes from self-extension. Make the world real unto yourself, because the real world is the gift of the higher mind, and so the real world belongs to you. Since the real world is the gift of the Holy Spirit, then the real world belongs to you, since it's the gift of the Holy Spirit. Correction is for all who cannot see. To open the eyes of the blind, that's the higher mind's mission. That's the divine indweller's mission. To open the eyes of the blind, that's the Holy Spirit's mission. Because the Spirit knows that your eyes, the eyes of the blind, have not lost their vision, but merely sleep. Correction is for all who cannot see. And to open the eyes of the blind is the higher mind's mission. Because the Holy Spirit knows that the eyes of the blind have not lost their vision. The eyes of the blind but merely sleep. Your divine indweller would awaken you from the sleep of forgetting to the remembering of love, eternal love that's within you, called God. Christ's eyes are open, and Christ will look upon whatever you see with love if you accept Holy Spirit's vision as yours. Higher mind, I accept your vision as mine, and now you will look upon whatever I see with love, because I accept your vision as mine, divine indweller of mine. Holy Spirit will look upon whatever you see with love if you accept Holy Spirit's vision as your vision. I accept Holy Spirit's vision as my vision. The Holy Spirit keeps the vision of Christ for every child of God who sleeps. In Holy Spirit's sight, every child of God is perfect, and Holy Spirit longs to share its vision with you. In Holy Spirit's sight, every child of God is perfect, and Holy Spirit longs to share this vision of your perfection with you. Your higher mind longs to share its vision with you. And your higher mind, your divine indweller, will show you the real world. Because God gave you heaven. It's already yours. So your higher mind can show you the real world. Because God already gave it to you. Because God gave you heaven already. Through the Holy Spirit in you, your Creator calls to you to remember. Your awakening begins with your investment in the real world. And by investing in the real world, you will learn how to reinvest in yourself. For reality is one with the Creator and the creation. And the loving right mind blesses the real world in our name. When you have seen this real world, as you will surely do, you will remember us. Yet now you must learn the cost of sleeping and refuse to pay it. Only when you learn the cost of sleeping and refuse to pay it, only then will you decide to awaken. I see the cost of sleeping and I refuse to pay it. I see the cost of sleeping and I refuse to pay it. Only then will I decide to awaken. And only when I decide to awaken, because I see the cost of sleeping and I refuse to pay it, then the real world will spring into your sight. Because the real you never slept. The real you in the real world is waiting to be seen. Because it never lost sight of you. And the real you looks quietly on the real world, which the real you wants to share with you, because the real you knows of your Creator's love for you. And knowing this, knowing your Creator's love, the real you, the Christ in you, wants to give you what's yours, which is the real world, which is heaven, which is God's real love for you. In perfect peace, the Christ in you waits for you at love's altar, in your mind, holding out the Creator's love to you in the quiet light of the Holy Spirit's blessing. Because the divine indweller in you will lead everyone home to their Creator, where their real self, their healed self, waits as their self. Every child of God is one in Christ. Every child of God is one in the real you, the real me. The real you, the Christ in you, its love for you is its love for its Creator, which it knows because he knows his Creator's love for it. When the divine indweller in you has at last led you to the real you, at the altar to the Creator in your own mind, then your perception will fuse into knowledge, into certainty, because perception has become so holy that perception's transfer to holiness is merely its natural extension. Love transfers to love without any interference, because the situations are identical. Love transfers to love without any interference, for the situations and relationships are identical. As you perceive more and more common elements in all situations, in all your relationships, then the transfer of your training under love's guidance increases and becomes generalized. The transfer of your training increases and becomes more generalized under the guidance of your loving right mind, the Holy Spirit. Gradually, you learn to apply Spirit's guidance to everyone and everything. Gradually, you learn to apply Spirit's truths to everyone and everything, because the applicability of Holy Spirit's guidance is universal. Gradually, you learn to apply Spirit's guidance to everyone and everything, because Spirit's guidance applicability is universal. Now, when this has been accomplished, perception and then knowledge have become so similar that they share the unification of the laws of God. Your perception becomes holy, it becomes knowledge. What is one cannot be perceived as separate, and the denial of the separation is the reinstatement of knowledge. The denial of differences and the denial of exceptions is the reinstatement of knowledge. At the altar of God in your mind, your holy perception becomes so enlightened that light streams into your perception, and then the Spirit of God's creation, you, shines in the mind of God and becomes one with it. Very gently does God shine upon Himself, loving the extension of Himself, which is you. The real world, the ego world has no purpose now as it blends into the purpose of God, for the real world has slipped quietly into heaven, where everything is eternal and has always been. Here in this place, where the real world has slipped quietly into heaven, there the healer and the healed join in the perfect love of the Creator and each other. In the real world, heaven is your home, and being in God, heaven must also be in you.